My dear brothers and sisters in the Lord, if you still remember, last Sunday, we heard the parable of the two sons sent by the father to work in his vineyard. The first one said, "Yes, I will go," but did not actually go. The other one said no at the beginning, but later changed his mind and went to the vineyard. The key to the correct understanding of the parable is that it is not really praising any of the two sons. It sets before us a picture of two imperfect sets of people. Neither son in the story was the kind of son to bring full joy to the father. Both of them hurt the father. But of course, the one who obeyed in the end is recognized as the better son. The better son, but not the ideal son. Actually, there is the third son, the ideal son, which the parable last Sunday did not talk about, because this son was the one relating the parable, Jesus. He is the third son, the ideal son, who said yes at the beginning and really meant it. Who said yes at the beginning, sustained his yes along the way, and carried it to the end, even it brought him to the cross, to death. Jesus, as the third son, the ideal son, is one in mind and heart with his father to take good care of the vineyard, which Isaiah in our first reading identifies as Israel. The house of Israel is the vineyard of the Lord. The vineyard which God takes good care. God nurtures Israel as his vineyard, but they were resistant. They wanted to run their lives independent from God. They don't want God to own them as his people, as his vineyard. And the resistance is shown in the gospel. They killed all the messengers sent by the owner. And this means the prophets, the kings, that God sent them to care for them as his vineyard. But God, in his divine providence, in his mercy for Israel, his care for Israel reached its climax when he sent his son, Jesus, but they still killed him. You see, this is what happened if we run our lives independent from God. We become violent. Once we lose the experience of God's caring love, we also lose our capacity to care for others. We become violent. We become greedy. We want to possess the vineyard and use the vineyard according to our selfish desires. We only think of ourselves. Everyone is a threat to our ambitions. we are filled with anger, we don't have peace. St. Paul, in our second reading, in his letter to the Philippians, says, God takes good care of us, so we should not be anxious. We should not worry too much. In our needs, we turn to God and pray. To be one with God in prayer means to be one in His mind and heart, like Jesus. And if we are one with God in His mind, in our hearts, in His hearts, our hearts will not be filled with anger, with violence, with greed. But if we are one with God, our minds will be filled with what St. Paul says, with what is true, with what is noble, with what is good, with what is pure, with what is honorable, with what is virtuous. Everything that is worthy of praise. What is worthy of praise these days? What is true? What is good? What is honorable? In this time of the pandemic, we see frontliners risking their lives, even to the point of being contaminated. But why are they doing this? Because they believe that this is what is true. This is what is noble. This is what is good. This is what is pure. This is what is honorable and virtuous. And you know, when we do this, we experience the peace that comes from God. The peace that comes from God who owns us. The God who takes good care of Israel despite her resistance. Israel is the vineyard of the Lord. But Israel is not just understood as a people. Israel is also understood as a place, as a land. That is why the most important promise of Yahweh to Israel in leaving Egypt was a land where they will live as a free people, freed from greed, freed from violence, because their values are the values of God who own them. So part of being God's people is also to care for the earth, for the land, for the environment. We are still on the season of creation, which began September 1 and will end on October 11. Today, this Sunday, October 4, we are given by the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines with the task to reflect on the importance of protecting our common home. And that is why this Mass, there are many dioceses in the Philippines who are connected to us. And Pope Francis, in his encyclical Laudato Si Misericordiae, reminds us that the earth is our common home. And last October 1, just few days ago, he released another social encyclical entitled Fratelli Tutti, which means we are all brothers and sisters. We are all interconnected. We are interrelated. And because of our interconnection, we need to care for each other. Our province, despite of the pandemic, we can still say that we are more stable in our needs for food. Once places are protected, the rainforests are protected, we develop our agriculture, we had unpolluted seas, we are assured that we are safe and we have enough goods to support us, to survive and to live. We are grateful that in our province we have this Andap Valley, a very beautiful place. But we need to protect it. We should not destroy it by mining or by any other means. Why? If we will not protect it, in few years' time we will have problems with water. And if we have problem with water, I don't know what will happen to our rice fields. We know one of our towns, San Miguel, once it was recognized as the third rice producing town in the country. In the country. If the upland environment is no longer nurtured and preserved, I don't know what will happen to our beautiful, crystal, and unpolluted, clear waters and beaches. If our seas will be polluted, tourism will collapse, and our livelihood will be affected. This is the kind of environment that will help us maintain our mental health. You know, those of you who have experienced isolation and quarantine, I share with your experience. I also passed through that. But you know, during this time of isolation, there are two things aside from prayer and rest that I do, especially in my room. But there were times, actually every day, every morning, I go to our beach there in Mabua. Morning. Every morning, I walk. I enjoy the sunlight, the sea breeze. Very healthy, very clean. Of course, I observe physical distancing. And after that, I go to the Padre Pio Chapel, the place where we desire to become a shrine in our diocese. A beautiful place. You look around, you see everything green, everything is vibrant, everything is growing. These are some of the important gifts of the vineyard that God entrusted us that we need to take good care for us to live, to protect our mental health. You know, to survive in this pandemic, yes, we need medicine. We need to take multivitamins. We need to eat the right food. But we also need a healthy environment. A healthy environment. And this environment is only possible if we protect our rainforest, if we develop our agriculture, if we preserve our unpolluted and crystal seas. We are all interconnected, the rest of creation. We need to maintain and preserve and nurture that interconnection which Saint Francis calls our brothers and sisters. That's why in one of his canticles, Brother Sun, he says, Brother Sun, Sister Moon. We actually celebrate his feast day today, October 4. But there is one important connection that we should not lose, which Israel took for granted. We should not lose our connection with God, the owner of the vineyard. And nurturing that connection means to allow God to own us. And allowing God to own us means to be one in His mind and heart. And if we are one in His mind and His heart, we will take good care of our homes, not just the members of our family or our social community, but as what Pope Francis said, the earth, our common home, so that in recognizing the beauty of creation, we will feel and contemplate the beauty and presence of God, who owns the vineyard, who owns Israel, and who owns all of us, His creation. Amen.